it's Aaliyah from the Song of the Winds. I hope you're doing really well. I have to admit, I've been quite slack with the My Witchy History tag that I created. I haven't intended to be slack, but it's actually turned out to be a bit harder than I thought. Particularly since I'm trying to, with this particular video, I'm trying to think back a very, very long period of time. I'm 35 now, so I'm thinking back to, when I was like 14, 15. So my brain's a little bit fuzzy, but basically the purpose of this video is the My Witchy History tag lifestyle and environment. So what my life was like and what my environment was like when I was first finding my path. So I've been thinking about it a lot. It's been on my mind a lot, and I've just not been able to really put it into words, so I'll do my best. Hopefully it's coherent. So I guess I'll just start with what life was like for me when I sort of found, witchcraft, Wicca, paganism, whatever you want to call it. I was probably in early high school, I'd say. I was still living at home. I didn't have a lot of commitments aside from school. At that time I didn't have an after-school job or anything like that. So really I just had an awful lot of time on my hands to study and to actually learn more about spiritual things. I found it came really, really easy to me when I was younger. When I was really young, and even now, my parents still have a book. I don't even know where it came from. It was published in the early 70s, and it was about witchcraft and the occult. And it was sort of more about like ceremonial magic, which has never really appealed to me too much. But there was pictures of Stonehenge and people dancing at different ceremonies around Stonehenge, and it just sort of imprinted on me quite young about how incredible that was. So I found the paganism side of things came very early to me, before I even kind of understood what that was. Just even from a very, very, very early age, I just felt a strong connection to the earth, and that's never changed, even though I've definitely fallen out of my practice over the years and have since sort of rediscovered it. If you've watched my first witchy history video, my favourite author back then was Scott Cunningham, and probably also Fiona Horn, mainly because they were the most accessible. And when Wicca was having a bit of a resurgence because the Craft movie had come out, it became relatively easy to get those sorts of books, and a lot of new age bookshops and things were springing up all over my local town, so it was relatively easy to get those things. Back in that day there was not really any internet to speak of. Like, there was dial-up. We first got a computer at home when I was probably 7 or 8, and it was this great big surprise. It was this massive green thing. It was really funny. It was huge. It was so big, and it was around about my birthday time, and I was convinced that my father had bought me this doll that I really wanted. Like, no, it's a surprise, it's for everyone. And he just started pulling this massive computer out of this box, and I was so disappointed. I'm like, ugh, what's that? And it was years before we had dial-up. Like, I probably would have been 12 or 13 before we had dial-up internet, and it was terrible, because internet in this country in Australia is just shocking. It's shocking now, but back then you can just imagine what it was like. So even though around that time there was starting to be different web pages, it was just simply easier to access that kind of information through books. And because I was young and I didn't have a car, and it was back in the late 90s and early 2000s, you used to get everywhere by public transport, or you would walk. So you constantly had all of this downtime, because we weren't hyper connected. So if you missed a bus, you just have to stand around until there was another one, and there was never really any, you wouldn't sort of freak out about that. But if I miss a bus by 2 minutes now, I'm like, the world's coming to an end, I'm so frustrated, but back then it was like, it's fine, I'll just wait for the next one. So you had heaps of time to read. So I was constantly reading. Like, I've set myself a challenge for this year that I want to read 12 books in the year, which is not a high goal, that's one book a month. But I just find it really difficult now with a small child, and getting that time where, if I read, I don't just like immediately fall asleep within a couple of pages. But yeah, I was just reading constantly and studying, and I had a fairly sort of well thought out book of shadows that I was working on, and it was just like a really, really lovely time in my life. And because my parents were quite supportive, I was really, really fortunate enough to be grow up in a family that weren't religious and were fairly open to anything, you know, spiritual nature, especially my mother. My father was just kind of like, oh well, you know, do whatever, it's fine. But mum was really into it, and I think my grandmother was too. I'm pretty sure there was a couple of spells that they both, you know, had me doing for them various times back then. And we were quite fortunate enough to have a fairly large yard, so there was absolutely no problem with me planting anything that I wanted. And I had a huge like container garden going, and you know, things planted in the ground. So it wasn't, because websites weren't really around so much then. If you couldn't get it at your local metaphysical store, or you couldn't afford it, as is probably likely for, you know, someone who was 15 or 16 years old maybe, who didn't have a job, you probably couldn't afford a $6 packet of frankincense or something like that. So I just began to grow my own herbs, and I was getting quite into moon gardening at that stage. So things were being planted in the right phase of the moon, even so much down to like the time of day. I was really picky about when I harvested. So everything that I was, you know, gathering for myself was actually like documented, and I don't think I was recording the you know, star sign that it was in or anything, but like definitely, you know, gathered in the waxy moon and blah blah blah. So yeah, that was pretty cool. It was really fun to find a lot of my tools that I ended up using at markets and garage sales. Once again, because I didn't have very much money, but I was blessed with a lot of time. It was really easy for me to go out and find all sorts of things. So I had like a really lovely collection of chalices, and I even found a really nice cauldron at a market stall one day. So that was, yeah, that was quite cool. And it was just, yeah, it was really easy. It was really easy time in my life. And now it's just simply more challenging. Like I really think if you fall out of habit of it, yeah, getting back in when you've got family commitments and work commitments can be a little bit tough. And I guess if anything, I'm really quite disappointed in myself for not having continued, having let myself get derailed, because I just think about where I would be in my practice now if I had have not missed like 15 years of my life, 15, 20 years actually, possibly, where I've inconsistently, you know, practiced. So I feel like now I'm just sort of playing catch up. So the year that I was born, that has been dubbed Zennial. So it's not Gen X and it's not Millennial, it's somewhere in between, where you had an analog childhood and a digital adulthood. In a lot of ways, I think there's many, many benefits to not being hyper-connected. I find that I'm so incredibly distractible now as I'm older, and I think it's because I'm just used to being like stimulated in so many different ways. I don't actually know what it's like to be bored anymore. If I'm bored, it's because I can't find anything I want to watch on Netflix or YouTube, or, you know, my Facebook feed's boring, or I've looked at everything on Instagram. That's like bored to me now. And when I was bored in the past, I used to have to go and read a book or go for a walk. So as much as I love that we're so connected by the web and you can meet people in really cool countries that you would probably never meet in any other, you know, way in your life, for me it's not ideal in a lot of ways. Sometimes I think I'd just like to go and live in the middle of the bush and just not be connected at all. Like maybe you could send me a letter on paper and that would be about it, because I can't trust myself to be so connected all the time. It's actually like analysis paralysis a lot of the time. Like I think of my to-do lists, they're just insane. And it's because I've got so many different options, I honestly don't know where to start. Like I must be in the middle of somewhere between like 8 and 11 short courses at the moment, easily. And I don't finish any of them because I get so caught up in the next thing, and I'm like, oh, that sounds really exciting, I'll start on that. And then for whatever reason I get derailed from that particular course, and then I sort of forget about it and I come back to it. But this year I really hope things are going to be different for me. really hope, because nothing changes if nothing changes. So I guess this is probably the most like disjointed video ever. But if I really think about my witchy history and what things were like when I... Oh, that's thunder. It's a blue sky outside with thunder. That's interesting. Yeah, just the level of distraction around is incredible. And it's hard for me because I've got tiny little snippets of free time now, but now that my daughter's old enough to, you know, walk around and do all that kind of stuff, it's simultaneously a little bit more freedom and a little less because I turned around the other day and she climbed up on the dining room chairs and she was just standing on them, like just standing on a chair, like could easily fall down. I just didn't even hear her climb up. I had my back turned for like 20 seconds. I think I was washing a dish, and yeah, she was just standing on a chair. So yeah, basically when she's having a nap or when she's at daycare is when I have to get all of the things done, and I find it really hard to pick which one. So my word for the year is cultivate, and I think in terms of the study that I want to do and knowing where, reflecting back and knowing what I really enjoyed in my sort of foundational time period, is just sticking to the one book. It is learning something and like really nailing it before I sort of move on to the next thing, so that you actually become proficient in something without just being a jack of all trades. It needs a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So yeah, I'm doing an astrology course right now, and I'm going to keep on going until I finish it, and I'm not going to look at any of the other courses that I've got until I have actually finished that one, because yeah, my brain can't fit all of that in, and I want to give it all the right, you know, amount of focus. So yeah, this video. But thank you for watching. I hope if you do a VR, I hope it will be a little bit easier to think of some things to say than I've sort of really struggled with this. The first video was filmed on Christmas Day, and it's now almost the end of February, and I'm not even sure that this is like everything that I want to say, and it's definitely not coherent, and it's definitely doesn't have any word economy whatsoever. But yes, if you would like to do a video response, I'd really love to watch. So yeah, so please get involved. And until I speak to you next time, I hope you have a lovely day, week, month, whatever it ends up being, and you take care. Okay,